Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I'm very excited to be a part of today's student conference, and especially getting the chance to talk to you about games publishing, something that I've been a key part of over the last few years as part of my career in the games industry. Myself, I've been now in the games industry for about 13 years, working for a variety of different indie and larger publishers, and through a variety of different product, analytics, and marketing roles. I've been building out this picture of what people like to do in the games that we play and how we can continue to improve our services for them. Currently at Hi-Rez Studios as the marketing director. And for those of you who don't know Hi-Rez Studios, we're a competitive online multiplayer gaming focused publisher and developer. We have a variety of live games out there at the moment. Our four main focused ones are Rogue Company, Smite, Paladins, and Realm Royale. We are working on some fun stuff that I can't quite tell you of just yet, but looking forward to announcing more of that not too distant future. Let's give you a little glimpse as to what that really looks like though in the real world. So that there, a short highlight reel from our World Championships that we hosted back in January, as well as our Hi-Rez Showcase, where we talk about all the cool stuff that's coming up throughout the year in all of our Hi-Rez games. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do it live and in person this year, obviously for obvious reasons, but it's also a great time for us to engage with the community. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit today about why events like that and other things that we do on the marketing side really help make great games shine through publishing. And why we're going to talk about that is important for making great games as a whole as well. I'm going to show you a bit of a publishing framework that we use on the Hi-Rez side to help sort of guide our general thinking, and show you a few concrete examples from that as well, and talk a bit about the types of people that help make great games publishing. So one of the common mistakes when it comes to starting out in the game industry and thinking about how you would release maybe your first game is that you sometimes think of it in too simple a way and just put your game out there, put it on Steam, and then hope that your friends see your tweet that it's going to be a massive success overnight and get loads and loads of downloads, etc. Unfortunately, that generally doesn't work. And part of the big problem behind that is there are just so many games releasing on a daily and even yearly basis. Last year alone on Steam, over 10,000 games were released. This problem is exacerbated when you then look at the likes of mobile phone stores, PlayStation Store, Xbox, etc. There are thousands and thousands of games being released. On top of that, you've got live service games that are constantly being updated with new content as well. So the chance of being discovered is just very, very small. But how do you maximize that chance of being discovered? Well, first off, you have to have a great game. There's no point throwing good money after a bad game. You're just going to burn a lot that way. But when you combine that then a great game with great publishing, that's when you have your real big chance of being discovered. But what do I mean by publishing? It's not just about putting ads out there or making a few cool tweets here and there. It's about a lot more than that. It's about really interacting with the market and figuring out where does your game fit within it. Are there particular parts of it, segments that we'll talk about in a moment, that really resonate with your audience and that you can actually then bring your game to? It's the process of bringing that game to market in the first place, so actually going from a concept through to actual release itself, but also on an ongoing basis, keeping those updates fresh and then keeping people to care about those. If caring is a really important piece of marketing and publishing as a whole. It's about creating an emotional hook that people want to then engage with when they actually play the game itself. As mentioned a few times now, the side of gaming that's really continuing to develop a lot at the moment is live games. And that's where we're seeing more and more games develop these constant services of more and more content coming. And that ongoing support is something that publishing is key to doing well. The other part of publishing is making sure it's not just a one-way communication from developers and marketing through to the players itself. It's the other way around. It's making sure the players are heard. So we do a lot on the sport and the community side to make sure that every player's voice is heard and cared for on the development side as well. And this is my sort of textbooky slide for the day, so I'll try and keep it a bit short on this, but there's two core pieces I want to take away from this, which is, first off, building a game and publishing are not separate entities. You have to be doing these two things together at the same time. The other is that there is a general good flow that helps guide good publishing. And it starts with market research in terms of building an understanding of what's out there, defining who the segments are that you want to go for and how you're going to target them, and then building a positioning that sets your strategy up for getting the right message across in the long term. The final piece is the sort of tactics, product, price, place, promotion, 4 Ps we'll talk about later on. And this is the piece that most people see when they think of marketing and publishing as a whole. But really this ongoing flow and this repeated cycle really that goes alongside game development is key to making sure that good publishing works. Like I say, you'll be going back and forth between the two on the dev and the publishing side, but it's important never to think of them as separate entities. And also sometimes these things do get a little bit more jumbled up than this chart seems to make them seem here. So what does this look like on one of our games? I'm going to show you a bit more about Smite. And for those of you who don't know Smite, I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like.
This realm can be saved. Remade. In my image. King Gilgamesh. You seek immortality, but you found only death.
So there we have Tiamat and Gilgamesh, our latest 2 gods, coming to blows at the start of Season 8 of Smite. Smite just celebrated its 7th birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Smite. Now, big flashy trailers aside like that, the whole idea of these trailers is not just to put out something that's fun like that, although that's part of it. It's also to get certain types of messaging across and hit certain types of audiences. So how do we go about figuring out who we're going to try and hit with a video like that? First off, we need to understand the market. We need to go through the various data sources that are out there to identify the right markets in terms of like where platforms are, in terms of which audiences are out there, and figure out where the opportunities lie for us as a business. There are various different paid data sources out there like Newzoo and SuperData, but you'll also find free data in the likes of SteamDB and various other charts that help you figure out trends as to what's currently important to players out there in terms of gameplay wise, as well as different themes that might be important as well. You can get really granular if you need to with your own surveys, but also by digging into your own social channels, as well as those of your competitors. And that latter often being somewhat more important, especially when you're trying to understand where the opportunities are for growth. And you can listen in on what people are saying and get a really clear picture of what's important in the whole market. Once you have all of that data, though, you have to make sense of it. And that's where segmentation comes in. And this is the grouping together of all of that data into very distinct buckets that allow you to say, okay, these audiences are relevant to you. They are particularly maybe important on the PC side or on the console side, or they like your types of games. Figuring out which of these segments are important for you helps guide your next pieces of your strategy building. To maximize the size of these segments, one thing that's worth keeping in mind is localization. And localization helps you reach new audiences that maybe don't speak the language you've originally developed your game in. If you look at the number of languages that are spoken globally, English is obviously a very important first language to cover as a game developer. You're going to hit a very big addressable audience that way. But by localizing into other relevant languages, you open yourself up to more and more markets. And how far you go with that, from just simple translation through to full-on internationalization, depends on the size of your studio and how much budget you want to be putting towards this. But thinking of it early helps you develop a great opportunity for this in the long term. Now, once you've figured out who you're going for, it's about thinking about where you're going to position yourself to reach the right audience and make sure they actually care about you. And this is where your brand comes in. Now, branding is a lot more than just a logo. If I was to look at the 3 logos here on the store, I couldn't really tell much of a difference between what these 3 games are offering. Positioning, though, then comes in as part of the brand to help people realize what's different about these games. You're trying to set the tone in their minds as to why they should care about your game compared to one of your competitors. Especially when you're looking at the same genre, like these 3 games here. If you're looking at Smite versus League of Legends or Dota, you're going to be thinking, okay, they're all MOBA games at heart. There's a core part that's the same to all of these, but there are differences, and it's trying to make players understand those differences. Unfortunately, you don't always control everything that the players think about your game. So there's going to be a lot of negative perceptions about you as well, and you're going to be trying to address those throughout your publishing process to make sure that you're listening to your players and also making sure that the dev team are working to help figure out how to address those concerns that come up. Now, when we look at a game like Smite, we can see there are many different ways to define what makes Smite unique and exciting. Everything from its mythological setting to having over 110 gods, the consoles and platforms that it's on, as well as its camera perspective. And all of these different perspectives might not be relevant to every segment. So depending on who you're targeting, you'll focus in on the ones that are most important to you there. This image on the right here is from our Steam page that's focused at a more PC-focused audience. And here we highlight things like the number of gods, the camera perspective, and the power elements of being a god as key pieces that players are going to dig into and find exciting when they're exploring the game in the early days. Now, once you've got all these pieces put together, it's time to start defining your strategy a bit more. And strategy is really about what you will do in your marketing process, as well as what you won't do. So on the Smite side, for example, we know at core we're best at doing competitive gaming. We're not going to go out there and make a game about gods that's an RPG. There are other games out there that do that, and they're probably going to be much better at in the long term than we are going to be if we try and do that now. So by focusing in on things like competitive gaming and free-to-play and cross-play, we know we can be best at that. And that gives us a chance to not waste resources and energy by trying to do things that maybe aren't as relevant to our audience either. One guiding mantra we use at Hi-Rez is do less better than obsess. And this is really about that, avoiding spinning lots of plates and focusing on the things that you can do best. Most importantly, don't just focus on doing them best. Once you are doing them best, try and stay ahead by doing those and really making sure that those results are felt by the players out there as well. So now we get to the piece of the marketing puzzle that people really see out there, which is tactics. And this is where the 4 Ps of marketing come in. Terrible joke, I know, I'm sorry. 4 Ps of marketing, though, have been around for years, and they hold true in all different industries that you look at. It starts off with the product, the game itself, the services around it. If you're doing something that's sold at retail, the packaging that as a part of that, everything that's tangible about the game itself, essentially. The price, are you going free to play? Are you going buy to play? Are you doing discounts? Are you doing sales? All these different pricing elements come in and can be adapted on an ongoing basis for your game. Promotion is the sort of piece that people think of a lot when they think of marketing. It's advertising, PR, it's social, but all of these pieces keep needing to be evolved and adapted as you're talking to different audiences. And finally, the place. So this is distribution, this is being on Steam, this is being on Epic, this is deciding to go on console, etc. All of these pieces can be adapted again, depending on the size and scale of what you want to achieve. So what does this look like when you're looking at a more specific set of examples in the world of Smite? Now you can engage with players through the product, things like battle passes, for example. We can adapt the themes of those on an ongoing basis and give players different areas to explore and different concepts that help engage them with the game in a longer term. We can also tweak the pricing there, and we can give them different discounts on certain types of way of engaging with systems like this. When we're having nice live events, again, we can do things in the esports space or in the cosplay space, or even just general community meet and greets. Anything that brings the players together and gets those hardcore players excited about being together with people who have like-minded experiences allows us to also learn from them. And we can learn so much from them when we have moments to just chat with them and listen and just enjoy the same games with them. Big events like that can be cost prohibitive for some, so don't be afraid though to ask those same questions, and again, listen to your community on your social channels and elsewhere. They're going to be more than happy to know that you're listening to them, because they always want to have their favorite game get better. Like I said, on the play side, for us, we're trying to be all about crossplay. And so we want to be on all the different stores, and having your games available on the PlayStation Store or Xbox helps make sure players can get to your games as easily as possible. Again, though, here comes promotion as well. Different artwork goes on different stores, and you want to be tweaking that and testing that to see what's relevant to the different audiences out there. In terms of creative testing, we do a lot of it. This is the number of pieces of banner creative we tested one year alone. It was, like I say, over 6,500 different variations. Everything from changing background colors to button placements. All of this is relevant when you're trying to figure out which is the right piece of art that explains your game to the relevant audience you're trying to reach. Now, this is also multiplied more if you have the resources for it when you're looking at video, websites, store pages, etc. Tweaking your creative, which is such a tangible piece of your campaigns to hit the right audiences, is key to making your campaigns work well in the long term. One of the sort of more experimental, but also out there ideas that we get to play around with is on the cross promotion side of things. Now, the great thing about cross promotion is people already have an understanding of what the other brand is that you're working with. So when we were talking earlier about setting that positioning of your brand and reaching audiences with it, you've already kind of done that with the cross brand you're working with. So when we work with a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or with an influencer like Dr. Disrespect, their audiences already understand what those brands mean. We can then work together with them to bring great experiences to life within our games that give them an idea of what they might expect when they come to play Smite or Rogue Company. Now, all of this great stuff that you're doing, to know that you're doing it well, you need data. And this is where we have a core group of people who focus really in on the deep details of data on an ongoing basis. But really, we try and encourage everyone within our group to be very data focused and scientific about what they do. Ultimately, your data is your players, and there's no better way to know that you're doing the right thing than seeing how your players interact with your game, how they interact with your campaigns, and getting that direct feedback back from them. Analyze your data to the nth degree and figure out what does and what doesn't work. There's so many great things you can learn from your players when you watch your data. So to tackle all of these different pieces of the publishing puzzle, here's how we've set ourselves up at Hi-Rez to sort of look at different pieces of the business. We have a core group that focus on more businessy things like business development, commerce. So that'd be things like you see in the battle passes, for example. They help design those, and as well as the sort of more pieces that are more creative, like building out the banners, building out the videos, doing our esports productions. But there are also a couple of bits you might not expect in either of these pieces. Player experiences include community management, as well as customer support and localization. You don't want to just be directly translating word for word everything you put out there, but put a bit of creativity into it. Make sure that things are culturally relevant to the people you're trying to speak to in different languages. Though these are two separate bubbles here on this chart, they're very intertwined with one another. And one relies very much on the other in order to make sure that you can get the best results. As mentioned earlier, though, it's also not just these two bits you see here for the publishing side, it's also very heavily integrated in what's going on the game development side. And that's what helps make the great experiences that we like to put out there. These here are some of the great people that make up our Hi-Rez publishing group. As you can see, it's a big, broad variety of people, though why we decided to give everyone access one day, I'm still not entirely sure was a good idea. Now, hopefully what you've seen here today has been exciting for you, and you may be thinking that something you'd like to explore further is how do you look at getting into the games publishing side of things. Now, when we're looking for people to join us on the publishing side, we're looking mainly for people with passion. Ultimately, you're going to be talking in some form, be that through direct communication or your art or videos or whatever, to the players in some format. And that passion needs to come across. So passion is key, and being able to show that when you're looking at finding new jobs and opportunities in the publishing space is also important for you. Expertise comes with time, and there are many different ways to get it. Whether you're working in different roles, whether you're doing little side projects on the side, bring that expertise with you, and it shows a great level of passion as well if you're doing these things on an ongoing basis. It also helps prove out curiosity. If you're self-learning, if you're trying to figure out different ideas on an ongoing basis and just trying to better understand how the industry works, that curiosity will keep growing with you. Unfortunately, things aren't always going to be plain sailing all the time, so being humble when you get knocked back and just moving forward and learning from it are really important traits to have. Similarly, the industry is constantly evolving, constantly changing, so being pragmatic about how it's going to affect you and how you're going to have to adapt to it is an important trait to have. So a quick summary of what we've covered today. I hope you can see now that a full game experience is a lot more than just the game itself. Publishing really does help put different elements of the game out there into the broader ecosystem that your players can then experience when they're away from the game, when they're out there getting their first impression of the game, and really firstly appreciating what the game and its community are all about. Don't leave it to luck. You're going to first off have to have a great game, but you're then going to have to put some effort on the publishing side and marketing side into it to really help ensure that your game has the best chance of being discovered, and also then the best chance of long-term and being remembered by the players as a whole. Combining these two together will give you the best chance of success. Use your strategy to guide your tactics. If you're building out a clever strategy with a clear picture of who it is you're trying to reach, the tactics that flow from that in terms of whether you're picking the right social channels or whether you're picking the right stores to put your games on will naturally flow from that strategy. Understanding that market and focusing on the core bits are really going to help guide a great successful campaign. Do less better and then obsess about them. And finally, there are a huge variety of roles in the games industry. It's not just about development. If you're curious of anything you've seen on the publishing side, I do encourage you to go and explore it more. There's tons of different ideas out there. And as I say, it's a constantly changing environment as well. So there are many different opportunities that haven't been discovered yet. Thank you. Oh, and as mentioned in the intro earlier, there is obviously things like mentoring via Intergames as well. Myself and a few others that are on the panelists today are available through that. As well as through the CIM as well. So yeah, do encourage you to make use of resources like that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. That was really great. And I also just want to say thank you for supporting the student membership program over this last academic year. It's been really vital for running all of these different kind of activities. So thanks for that. I've got a few questions that have come into the Q&A here that I thought would be great if you could just give us some answers to. So the first one's from Anna, and Anna said, has the rise of streamers and influencers affected your marketing strategy? Did you increase budget or restructure to utilize them?
Good question. Yeah, so if I think back to when I first started in games, influencers were very much like not a huge piece of the marketing tool set at the time. Now we really think of it more of where is the right audience, and if it depends on if they're the type of audience that go, yes, we're watching certain streamers or YouTubers and they're the one we want to reach of our game, then they're one of the things we're going to most likely put on our marketing plan and go, right, how much budget do we put towards it? The scale, it really does depend on the game, on the update and the message we're trying to reach. There are so many different channels out there. So you can do a great campaign with lots of smaller channels or with one bigger channel. There's so many different options available, and it really does depend on who it is you're trying to reach and what the overall goal is of that campaign.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, that kind of answers the second one, because the second question was, you mentioned cross promotion with influencers like Dr. Disrespect, but how useful are influencers? So is it more useful to go for someone who's got a massive audience, or someone who's got, like, say, 5,000 core followers of your specific genre of game? So I suppose, like you said there, it depends what the type of game is, right, and who you're trying to.
It depends on the type of game, on the type of budget you have available to yourself as well. Sometimes, I mean, getting access to a big streamer like Disrespect is obviously a huge opportunity in terms of the audience that they have already established with them. And these other channels like his, they have many big audiences that follow them on an ongoing basis. But at the same time, it can be just as exciting to see a smaller streamer grow with your game. And as your game's growing, establish them as the face almost in some ways of that game. So yeah, there are so many different options when it comes to the channels that are out there. But finding the right mix that makes sense for your game is really sort of guided by your overall strategy of what you're trying to achieve long term with the campaign.
Yeah, oh, that makes sense. Awesome. Okay, we've got a question here from Rowan. So, when developing a new game, how do you decide when you've done enough market research? Do you simply do as much as you can in the time that's available?
Good question. Yeah, ultimately, you never really stop with the market research. Especially with games that maybe take several years to develop, you'll have got an idea of what the market looks like at this time you start working on the game, but that idea will evolve over time as well. The market will change in terms of what it considers as exciting games to be playing, but also you'll maybe encounter things where you go, right, this game, this was what we thought was fun at first. Actually, it's not as fun as we thought it was. Let's make a tweak. Oh, maybe this game's now a bit different. Or maybe it's actually going to appeal to a different audience. And so you'll never really stop with the market research. You'll constantly be evolving it and evolving your thinking of what the market and the relevant segments look like.
Okay, awesome. So another question here from Gordon. So thank you very much for the talk. It was really interesting. Just a quick question about using social media to promote the game when intertwining that with what you had spoken about. What key elements would you say make a successful marketing tweet?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It has to be relevant to what you're trying to get across messaging wise, first of all. So there'll be a core message of what you're trying to put out there. That'll often be guided by what your brand is. But I'm going to stop myself there. There's so many options of how you could be tweeting. Like a great marketing tweet, for example, could also be maybe a reply to someone else's tweet. So I was about to say it could just be the first way of putting that initial message out there. But there are so many different angles you could come at this problem from. At its core, be true to your brand, be true to what you're trying to get across messaging wise, and then it'll have the effect in the long term that you wanted that tweet to have. But in terms of core elements that go into it, yeah, it really does depend on the situation of how you got to it, whether you're putting that initial message out yourself or if it's something in response to an opportunity that's come up from a trend that's happening. Yeah, so many different options there. Yeah,
I mean, a good example of that was that baked beans tweet recently where it was the baked beans and Weetabix, and then everyone was replying to that.
Yeah.
I just saw that opportunity, but yeah, that's perfect. And then the final question here from an anonymous attendee is, which social media platform is best for marketing to gamers?
Another great question. And again, unfortunately, it depends. It depends on who you're trying to reach. If your game is very, for example, hardcore PC focused, you'll probably see a lot of benefit from being on the likes of Discord, Reddit, maybe Twitter. If your game is focused on maybe a older female audience, you might see better benefits from being on Facebook. If you're focusing maybe more on being on like a South American market or other places that are not native to your like UK sort of perspective, again, you might have a very different perspective on which networks you want to go for there. Russia has a very dominant social network called VK. So that they're, again, very dependent on who you're trying to reach as to where you're going to find the best audience.
Awesome. All right, cool. That's all the questions. Thank you for answering those questions. And again, thank you very much for taking your time out to come and deliver that presentation. Everyone appreciates it. So thank you again.